She bit her finger and whispered, "Make me stop thinking about him," and suddenly, nothing felt simple anymore. It started like any ordinary afternoon, the kind that seems too mundane to matter, yet somehow, everything shifts in a single glance. My friend had invited me over for a casual get-together, a small backyard gathering with familiar faces, the kind of event where laughter floated lazily with the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint tang of barbecue smoke. I wasn't expecting to notice her, not really. After all, she was my friend's older sister, someone I had met before, but only in passing. Someone I had always classified as off-limits. And yet, the moment she walked into the yard, everything changed. She carried herself with that effortless grace that makes it impossible not to notice her. Not flamboyant, not demanding attention, but present in a way that quietly pulls you in. Her hair caught the late afternoon sunlight, strands of chestnut gleaming gold, and a subtle scent lingered around her, something floral but warm, like sunlight filtered through old books. There was a confidence in the way she moved, a soft rhythm in her steps, the ease with which her hands brushed against the rim of a glass or tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. I found myself watching small gestures I didn't usually notice. The way her lips curved slightly when she smiled, the gentle tilt of her head when she laughed, the faint crease at the corner of her eyes that hinted at countless stories she'd never tell. It wasn't just physical attraction. I could sense layers of experience and quiet vulnerability behind her gaze. That was what caught me most, the balance of strength and softness, of confidence tempered by something tender and unspoken. We didn't speak at first. I lingered nearby under the guise of helping with drinks, but my attention kept drifting toward her. Every laugh she shared with my friend, every casual brush of her hand, seemed charged with subtle meaning I couldn't place. And yet I didn't dare cross the invisible line that separated curiosity from impropriety. My mind raced with questions I didn't even fully understand. How is it that someone so present can feel both distant and immediate at the same time? Why does the air feel heavier when she's around? Even the small details stayed with me, the warmth of the sun against her skin, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the summer breeze, the soft fabric of her sweater brushing against her arm as she reached for a plate. I felt an inexplicable pull, a subtle electricity that made ordinary motions feel charged, moments suspended in a way I couldn't explain. By the time the gathering wound down, I realized something had shifted. It wasn't dramatic, she hadn't noticed me staring, and no words had been exchanged, but I could no longer categorize her as just my friend's sister. She was someone who had carved a quiet space in my mind, a presence that demanded attention without demanding it, and left a trace of longing I wasn't ready to confront. That afternoon planted the seed of curiosity, a tension that whispered of possibilities I had barely dared imagine. And though I didn't know it yet, that fleeting, sunlit encounter was the first spark of something neither of us could ignore. The next time we found ourselves alone, it wasn't planned. We had volunteered to help clear up after my friend's little gathering, stacking plates and gathering napkins while the evening air cooled around us. At first, it was purely practical, hands brushing as we passed each other dishes, exchanging small, polite smiles. But there was something in the way the world seemed to shrink around us, something that made ordinary chores feel intimate. She laughed at a clumsy stumble I made, and her laugh wasn't just a sound, it was a vibration that settled in my chest, warm and unexpected. Her eyes met mine for a moment, and there was a softness there, a curiosity that matched my own. Without realizing it, I found my hand hovering near hers when we reached for the same plate. Our fingers brushed, just briefly, but long enough that I could feel the faint heat of her skin, the subtle pulse of her wrist. It was startling how quickly my mind fixated on the smallest, most innocent contact, how electric something so minimal could feel. We lingered near the sink longer than necessary. The room smelled faintly of soap and lingering food, but there was another scent too, her perfume, subtle, warm, almost like vanilla mingled with sunlight. I noticed the way her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulder, the gentle curve of her neck as she tilted her head to speak. Every detail seemed amplified, each small gesture charged with unspoken meaning. Conversation came easily, almost too easily. She spoke with a teasing warmth, joking about minor disasters from the party, yet every word seemed layered, inviting me closer without demanding it. I found myself leaning slightly forward, drawn in by the natural rhythm of her speech. I noticed the way her eyes lingered on mine, how she seemed to measure my reactions, how a subtle smile would tug at the corner of her lips when our glances met. At one point, her hand rested briefly on my arm to emphasize a point. The touch was light, fleeting, but it left a trace, a warmth that lingered long after she withdrew it. I could feel the quiet steadiness of her presence pressing against me, a sensation both grounding and unsettling. I wanted to withdraw, to remind myself that she was my friend's sister, that boundaries existed, yet a part of me ached to let the moment stretch, to linger in that unspoken connection just a little longer. The world outside the kitchen faded. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint chatter from the living room, even the clink of dishes all seemed muted, as if they existed on a different plane. For those few minutes, it was just her and me, caught in the delicate tension between familiarity and something far more charged, something I couldn't yet name. And when the moment ended, when she finally moved away to help my friend with something else, I realized I was already replaying it in my mind, the brush of her hand, the tilt of her head, the warmth in her eyes. I knew, even then, that this seemingly ordinary interaction had planted the beginnings of a connection neither of us would soon forget. After that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't just the way she looked, or the fleeting touch of her hand, it was the subtle, lingering presence she left behind, the way ordinary moments seemed charged with meaning whenever she was near. I caught myself replaying the curve of her smile, the soft tilt of her head, the rhythm of her laughter that seemed to echo long after the sound had faded. It was disorienting. She was my friend's sister, older, with a quiet confidence that made the world feel somehow bigger and more complicated than my own life. And yet, every time I saw her, there was this magnetic pull, impossible to ignore, threading through my chest like a low hum of electricity. I began noticing things in ways I hadn't before, the way her fingers lingered on a glass, the subtle tension in her shoulders when she laughed nervously, the quiet depth in her gaze when she wasn't smiling. Then there was the moment she confided something personal, completely unprompted. We had been sitting on the porch after another gathering, the night air crisp and scented with grass and faint smoke from the barbecue. She spoke softly about a past relationship, how it had ended, the mistakes she regretted, and the loneliness that sometimes lingered despite her confident exterior. As she spoke, she bit her finger lightly, a nervous habit I hadn't noticed before. The motion was so intimate, so quietly revealing, that I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand and reassure her without words, but I hesitated, aware of the line I couldn't cross. Even so, I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, the subtle pulse beneath my fingertips in my imagination, and it was enough to make my heart race. Her vulnerability struck me with unexpected force. Beneath the confident, composed exterior was someone quietly searching, for reassurance, for connection, for someone who could understand without judgment. And somehow, she had chosen to share that moment with me. I felt honored, but also painfully aware of the complexity of my own emotions. The inner conflict grew. Every glance, every fleeting touch, every shared smile began to feel layered with unspoken meaning. I was torn between admiration and desire, between the comfort of being near her and the fear of overstepping boundaries. And yet, part of me wanted to lean into the tension, to see where it might lead, even if it risked awkwardness or misunderstanding. By the time we parted that night, the air between us felt charged, almost alive. I could still feel the imagined warmth of her hand, the echo of her laughter, the subtle weight of her words lingering in my mind. I knew I was thinking about her more than I should, and yet I couldn't stop. She had become a quiet obsession, a presence I carried with me long after we were apart, and I sensed that the moments we shared, innocent, fleeting yet charged, were only the beginning of something neither of us fully understood. It was one of those quiet evenings that seemed to exist outside time. The house was calm, the distant hum of traffic blending with the faint rustle of leaves outside the window. Somehow, by sheer accident, or perhaps fate, we ended up alone in the living room. She had been talking softly about something trivial at first, laughter threading through her words, but there was an undercurrent I hadn't noticed before: hesitation, a weight behind her casual tone, like she was holding something back. Then it happened. Her fingers came to her lips in a nervous habit I hadn't seen before. She bit the tip of one finger lightly, just enough to draw attention without seeming deliberate. My chest tightened in response, a strange awareness settling over me. There was a vulnerability in that small gesture, an unspoken plea woven into the subtle tension of her body. And then, almost as if testing the air between us, she whispered, "Make me stop thinking about him." The words hit me in a way that was equal parts startling and magnetic. I didn't move at first. I only noticed the way her eyes flicked to mine, uncertain, searching. Her hair fell forward, brushing her cheek, soft and warm, and I wanted, instinctively, to tuck it back behind her ear. The room felt suddenly smaller, the space between us electric and impossibly intimate. She didn't elaborate, but she didn't have to. The simple confession, wrapped in that nervous gesture, spoke volumes. There was longing there, a quiet ache, a conflict she hadn't yet put into words. My own heart thudded painfully in response, aware of the delicate line we were balancing on. I wanted to reach out, to ease the tension, to let her know she wasn't alone in the swirl of thoughts and emotions that had been quietly building between us. I found myself studying her small movements, the subtle rise and fall of her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hand as it hovered near her mouth, the almost imperceptible catch in her breath when our eyes met. Every detail was amplified, each nuance carrying weight I hadn't anticipated. And yet, there was a careful restraint in her posture, a line she hadn't yet crossed and perhaps didn't intend to. I knew that I could respond in 1,000 ways, yet words felt insufficient. So I stayed still, letting the silence between us hold its tension, letting my attention linger where it mattered. My gaze traced her contours, not in a way that was intrusive, but with awareness, the gentle curve of her cheek, the warmth of her skin, the quiet vulnerability she revealed without needing to speak it aloud. In that suspended moment, the boundary between friendship and something more blurred, but it didn't break. We existed in a shared space of quiet intensity, a slow-burning connection that neither of us could ignore. Her simple words had opened a door, one that hinted at desire, longing, and trust, and I realized that the next steps would be delicate, tentative, but potentially transformative. By the time the evening ended, the words lingered between us, unspoken yet fully understood. I left with the weight of her confession pressed softly against my chest, aware that the spark we had shared, subtle, hesitant, and profoundly intimate, was only beginning to grow. After that quiet evening, things began to shift in small, almost imperceptible ways. We found ourselves spending more time together, under pretense or coincidence, helping with errands, going for walks, or simply sitting in the same space while she read or I worked on something nearby. Nothing was overt, yet every encounter carried a weight that neither of us could fully ignore. Even ordinary moments became charged. There was the way her hand would brush mine when passing an object, the soft laugh that followed a shared joke, or the way our shoulders would occasionally touch as we leaned toward the same counter. It was subtle, fleeting, and yet undeniably electric. Every touch seemed to linger longer than necessary, and every glance held an unspoken conversation that words couldn't capture. I began to notice the quiet ways she revealed herself, the way she would tilt her head when listening, the tiny crease of concentration between her brows, the warmth in her eyes when she spoke about something she cared about. She was confident, yes, but there was also a vulnerability, a need for connection that she didn't show to everyone. And somehow, I had become the one she trusted enough to let slip through the cracks of that carefully maintained composure. Our conversations deepened naturally, moving from small talk to thoughts and reflections we hadn't shared with anyone else. She spoke of dreams and regrets, of past mistakes and fleeting victories. I listened, quietly absorbing, careful not to overstep, letting the space between words carry as much meaning as the words themselves. And when I spoke, I could feel her attention, her interest, as if she were searching my reactions, weighing the sincerity in my voice. Physical contact remained minimal but meaningful. a hand resting briefly on her shoulder while guiding her through a doorway. Brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Sitting close enough for the warmth of her presence to be tangible, yet not so close as to feel invasive. Each gesture carried layers of emotional intimacy, a silent conversation that neither of us could fully articulate but both understood. The subtle tension between us became a quiet rhythm in my life, one I began to anticipate with a mix of excitement and apprehension. It was a slow, deliberate dance, one measured in shared glances, tentative touches, and the steady, unspoken reassurance that we were both feeling something significant. I could sense her hesitation, her curiosity, her moments of doubt, and each of those moments only drew me closer, making me want to understand her more deeply, to be the person she could lean on without fear or pretense. By the end of these days spent together, the connection had become undeniable. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't forced, and it wasn't loud, but it was real. The slow-burning tension simmered beneath the surface, building a foundation of trust, attraction, and quiet desire that promised something deeper, something worth exploring carefully, thoughtfully. And though neither of us said it aloud, both of us knew that this connection was changing the way we felt, subtly but irrevocably. The air between us had grown heavier over the past few days, a quiet charge that neither of us could ignore. By now, the slow accumulation of shared glances, fleeting touches, and moments of laughter had created a rhythm, one that hinted at something far more profound than friendship, yet neither of us dared name it. It happened on a rainy afternoon. The sky had turned a soft gray, and the rhythmic patter of raindrops against the window created a cocoon around us. We had ended up in the living room, sitting side by side on the couch under the pretense of watching a movie, though our attention lingered elsewhere. She leaned slightly toward me, not fully aware of the effect her presence had, but I could feel the warmth radiating from her shoulder, the subtle weight of her leaning just enough to close the distance between us. Her hand rested on the arm of the couch, close enough that my fingers brushed against hers occasionally. Each touch, no matter how slight, sent a pulse through me that I could hardly ignore. The silence between us was dense, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to speak, to reach for her hand fully, to ease whatever tension she carried, but something told me to wait, to let her set the pace. Then she spoke, her voice low and tentative, sharing something she had never revealed before. A story from her past, a moment of vulnerability, a fear she had tucked away behind her composed exterior. Her words were soft, yet each one carried weight. I could see her fingers fidgeting, her foot tapping lightly against the floor, the subtle catch in her breath as she recounted it. And as she spoke, I realized how deeply she trusted me, how carefully she had let me into the corners of her heart she usually kept hidden. Our glances met, lingering longer than necessary, and in that moment, I understood the gravity of what was unfolding. My hand moved instinctively, brushing hers gently, letting the warmth linger without forcing it. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers relaxed slightly, and a quiet sigh escaped her lips. The closeness was intimate, yet wholly innocent, an unspoken acknowledgement of the tension that had been building between us. Time seemed to stretch. I could feel the rise and fall of her chest, the subtle warmth of her hair brushing my arm, the way her eyes searched mine for understanding. Every detail, the tilt of her head, the slight tremor in her hands, the softness of her voice, amplified the connection we had been nurturing slowly, carefully. It was a delicate dance of restraint and longing, each of us aware of the pull yet conscious of the line we could not cross recklessly. By the end of the afternoon, the room was filled with a quiet resolution. We didn't need to speak the words aloud. The shared warmth, the lingering touches, and the depth in our eyes said enough. The tension had reached its peak, a culmination of all the small moments that had led to this point. And though we knew the path ahead was uncertain, we both understood one truth: whatever this was between us, it had transformed into something undeniable, something neither of us could ignore. The tension that had simmered for days, weeks, now found its gentle release. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't sudden, it unfolded quietly, like sunlight spilling slowly across a room at dawn. We were sitting together again, this time in the garden, the air warm but soft with a gentle breeze. The world around us seemed to fade, leaving only the space we shared, the subtle rhythm of our breathing, and the quiet acknowledgement of everything we had felt but never fully said. She spoke first, her voice soft but steady. She didn't apologize, and she didn't explain, she simply admitted, in her own graceful way, that she trusted me, that she had begun to rely on my presence in ways that surprised even her. The words weren't flamboyant or theatrical, they were grounded, honest, and quietly powerful. My chest tightened, a mix of relief and joy, as I realized that the connection we had nurtured, the delicate thread of trust, laughter, and subtle longing, was mutual. As she leaned back slightly, I reached for her hand, brushing my fingers along hers. The touch was careful, respectful, yet filled with warmth, the kind of comfort that speaks without words. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with mine naturally, as though this closeness had always been inevitable. There was a sense of balance now, a shared understanding that didn't need to be spelled out. We were here, present with each other, and nothing needed to be rushed or forced. We laughed together softly, the kind of laughter that comes from relief and connection, a shared recognition of the long path that had led to this moment. I noticed the subtle cues that had always drawn me in, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the gentle curve of her lips, the warmth of her shoulder when it brushed mine. Every detail felt amplified, every movement infused with meaning. And in that shared space, I realized how much we had come to mean to each other. Then came the quiet, almost imperceptible gestures that sealed the moment. A hand resting lightly on her back as she leaned toward me, a brief touch to her cheek as I offered reassurance, the lingering pressure of our fingers entwined. Each contact was innocent, yet it spoke volumes: trust, affection, desire tempered by respect. I could feel the subtle heartbeat beneath her skin, the warmth of her breath mingling with mine, the unspoken promise that we were stepping into something real, something enduring. As the evening sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and gold, I felt a profound sense of closure. Not the end of a story, but the fulfillment of a journey, one that had begun with fleeting glances, casual touches, and quiet confessions, and had grown into a genuine, deeply felt connection. We had navigated hesitation, social boundaries, and our own emotional uncertainties, and emerged with something steady, comforting, and beautiful. In that serene moment, I understood the essence of what we had built: intimacy without urgency, desire without recklessness, and trust without reservation. The slow burn had found its warmth, and with her hand in mine, her eyes meeting mine with quiet affection, I knew that whatever the future held, we had discovered a connection that was both rare and enduring, a love that didn't need to shout, but only to exist.